Let's talk about a narrative you may have heard, that white South Africans, particularly Afrikaners, are being discriminated against and are leaving South Africa as refugees, that they're being pushed out, marginalized, and hunted. It's a narrative that's gaining traction in some quarters of the American political discourse, pushed by voices like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, even by Musk's AI that's built into his social media platform, Grok. Though they've worked to make some changes to what Grok will tell you about this story, it does deserve some unpacking, because this problematic narrative about a complex situation in South Africa is being used to actually say something about America. Now, to understand the story well, we have to go back, way back, 373 years back, to April 6th, 1652. Three ships from the Dutch East India Company, the Dromedaris, the Reiger, and the Good Hope, land on the shores of what will become Cape Town. That was the start of a 300-year project of white settler colonialism, which would eventually lead to a tiny white minority ruling over a massive black majority in and across southern Africa. 1652 was the beginning of one of the most brutally sophisticated systems of racial oppression that the modern world has ever known, a system that would in 1948 become entrenched into law as apartheid. Afrikaners, descendants of those French and Dutch settlers, called themselves Boers. The word Boer means farmer, and it's where the term the Boer War comes from. The Boers built their identity around independence, strict Calvinist values, and later the institution of white supremacy. They cited the Bible as justification for suppressing non-white people. The word apartheid itself didn't officially enter politics until the national elections of 1948 in South Africa, the one that took South Africa from being just a racist British colony into an independent and thoroughly racist republic. But long before that, British colonists and Boer settlers were already competing over which one of them could treat the black population worse. As I wrote in my book, Small Acts of Courage, they weren't trying to build a better society. They were trying to outdo each other in oppression. There was this belief among Afrikaner nationalists that in a truly democratic South Africa, one in which non-white people could vote, white people would lose everything. And they didn't just target black South Africans, whom they referred to with the derogatory term Kaffers. Indians, like my ancestors who arrived in South Africa in 1893, were called coolies, also a derogatory term. Colored people, the name for people of mixed race, were segregated, they were monitored, they were dehumanized. During that election in 1948, the National Party's campaign slogan read, it was an Afrikaans term, Die Kaffer op sy plek, die coolies uit die land, which translates to the black man in his place, the Asians out of the country. This was literally racism codified, defended, and exported. But then came 1994, a miracle, a revolution without a war. Nelson Mandela elected. White South Africans, including Afrikaners, held a referendum leading up to those elections in which they essentially voted themselves out of power. It was and remains a remarkable act of democratic humility. The Afrikaners knew the game was up and the future lay in a true multiracial democracy. Today, the South African government uses affirmative action and black economic empowerment to redress 3 centuries of economic and educational exclusion, their version of what one might call DEI. And yes, some white South Africans, Afrikaners included, say that this feels a lot like reverse discrimination. They point to quotas in public schools, shifting university admissions, government contracts going to black-owned firms. And just like in America, there are extremely poor white communities in South Africa, a situation that was only worsened since the end of apartheid, with whites losing their special standing in society. Afrikaans, once the dominant language, while still one of 11 national languages, isn't the primary language anymore. And farm attacks, heinous crimes, have happened. White farmers have been murdered in acts that can only be described as terrorism. In 2024, between October and December, 12 people were killed in attacks on farms. But the idea that these are part of a targeted genocide against white people, that claim has no basis in fact. This is where the story stops being about South Africa and starts being about America. In 2018, President Donald Trump tweeted that he would ask the State Department to investigate the, quote, large-scale killing of white farmers in South Africa. No data, no context, just the echo of a white nationalist talking point. Elon Musk, born in South Africa, has echoed similar sentiments, painting Afrikaners as victims of a hostile black majority government. Just this week, Elon Musk shared at least 20 posts on X about South Africa and what he calls anti-white laws. But ask yourself, is this really about concern for Afrikaners? Or are Afrikaners being used, deployed, as symbols in a broader American narrative that says white people everywhere are under attack? It's a way to justify grievance politics here at home, to stoke fear, to say, look, this is what happens when minorities take over. Afrikaners, descendants of colonizers, are being recast as victims of multiculturalism, pluralism, and true democracy, as messy and complicated as democracy can be. The story of the plight of the Afrikaner is being distorted to scare white Americans into thinking that they, too, are being replaced, pushed aside, and erased. So the question remains, are Afrikaners being discriminated against? Some feel they are, and they may be right. But South Africa today is not apartheid in reverse. It is the hard, necessary, often ugly work of repair, of justice, of democracy trying very hard to make right what was very, very, very wrong for more than 300 years. Let us not turn that effort into a weapon. Let us not borrow someone else's history to fight our own culture wars, because if we care about the truth, we actually have to care about all of it, even when it doesn't fit the narrative that we're trying to sell.